Have you ever been genuinely surprised that someone disagreed with you? Not because they were trying to argue, not because they misunderstood, not because they were being dishonest, but because they sincerely believed something completely different was obvious. You leave the conversation thinking, how could anyone possibly see it that way? Meanwhile, somewhere else, they're asking the very same question about you. How can that happen? How can two thoughtful, reasonable, well-intentioned people look at the very same world and each quietly assume that most other people must surely agree with them? The strange thing is, this doesn't happen only during arguments. It happens when we vote, when we raise children, when we spend money, when we choose careers, when we fall in love, when we watch the news, when we walk through our neighborhoods, when we imagine what most people must think. Without realizing it, our minds perform a remarkable shortcut. We quietly begin treating our own experience as though it were the ordinary one. Psychologists have spent decades studying this tendency, and what they discovered reveals something surprisingly beautiful about the human mind. Not because we're arrogant, not because we're selfish, but because our own lives are the only lives we've ever lived. Every morning, you wake up inside the same mind that has accompanied you your entire life. You remember your victories, your disappointments, your family, your fears, the conversations that changed you, the people who shaped you, the moments you have never forgotten. From the inside, your experience feels perfectly normal. After all, it's all you've ever known. You rarely stop to wonder how extraordinary your own perspective actually is, because it doesn't feel like one perspective. It feels like the world itself. Then one day, someone says something that completely surprises you. Not because it's complicated, because it seems impossible that anyone could honestly believe it. Perhaps you've experienced this after an election, during a family dinner, at work, with an old friend, or while reading thousands of comments beneath a single video. The disagreement itself isn't always the surprise. The surprise is discovering that your own experience isn't nearly as universal as it felt. Imagine walking through your own neighborhood. The streets are familiar, the houses, the sounds, the routines. Everything feels comfortably ordinary. Then a visitor arrives. They notice different things. Different details, different concerns, different beauty. You both walked the very same streets, yet your experiences are quietly different. Now imagine this happening every day with everything. Every workplace, every classroom, every restaurant, every family gathering. Every conversation, every social gathering, every city, every country. The remarkable thing isn't that human beings experience life differently. The remarkable thing is how rarely we remember they do. Without intending to, we begin assuming that what feels familiar to us must also feel familiar to most other people. That our priorities are ordinary priorities. that our concerns are ordinary concerns, that our conclusions are simply what reasonable people conclude. No one teaches us to think this way. It emerges naturally, because your own experience is the one thing you never step outside of. Imagine trying to describe the taste of water to a fish. The fish cannot compare it to anything else. Water isn't merely its environment. It is the background against which every other experience takes place. Human experience works much the same way. We spend our entire lives inside one perspective, so complete, so familiar, that we gradually stop experiencing it as our perspective. We begin experiencing it as simply how people are. And that quiet assumption will shape far more of your life than you have ever imagined. Imagine walking into a crowded theater. Hundreds of people fill the seats around you. The lights dim. The film begins. People laugh, fall silent, lean forward, react. When the credits finally roll, everyone stands and begins walking toward the exit. You overhear conversations. "That was incredible. I don't understand why people liked it. It was funny. It was heartbreaking. It was far too slow." The remarkable thing isn't that people disagree. The remarkable thing is how surprised they often are that anyone could. Imagine a family gathered around a dinner table. One person believes everyone should eat together every evening. Another quietly assumes that independence is healthier. Neither pauses to wonder where those assumptions came from. They simply feel normal, natural, obvious. The same thing happens at work. One manager believes people do their best when they're trusted. Another believes people perform best when they're closely supervised. Each has experiences that seem to prove their view. Each quietly assumes most reasonable people would probably agree. The remarkable thing is that our minds rarely ask, "How common is my experience?" Instead, they quietly substitute a much easier question: what has been true for me? And because your own life is always available, your mind naturally treats it as the best evidence for understanding everyone else. Not because it's careless, because it's efficient. Your own experiences are the largest collection of evidence you possess. Eventually, psychologists gave this tendency a name: the false consensus effect. The quiet habit of overestimating how many other people share our beliefs, our preferences, our decisions, and our experiences. Not because we believe everyone is identical, but because our own perspective always feels a little more ordinary than it really is. Imagine trying to estimate how many stars exist above the clouds while standing inside a small clearing in the forest. Your view is genuine, but it is also limited. Not because you are standing in the wrong place, because every observation begins from somewhere. Human experience works much the same way. Every one of us begins life inside one family, one culture, one neighborhood, one history, one body, one mind. Those experiences quietly become our reference point, not because we choose them, because they arrived before we knew there were alternatives. Researchers have found that human beings often rely upon their own thoughts, their own memories, and their own experiences when trying to imagine what other people think. It feels reasonable because those experiences are immediately available. The difficulty is that availability isn't the same thing as representativeness. The people you have known, the places you have lived, the conversations that shaped you are profoundly real, but they are not the whole world. Notice how quietly the assumption forms. My friends think this. My family believes this. The people I know would all agree. Slowly, almost invisibly, our circle begins feeling like the center. Then one day, we encounter someone whose life unfolded along an entirely different path. Different parents, different struggles, different victories, different fears, different communities, different stories. And suddenly, what felt universal becomes personal. Perhaps the most surprising discovery isn't that other people see the world differently. Perhaps it's realizing how naturally we expected them not to. Imagine walking through a city you've never visited before. At first, everything feels unfamiliar. The streets, the conversations, the customs, the rhythm of daily life. Then, someone who has lived there their entire life begins showing you around. Places you would never have noticed. Stories hidden inside ordinary buildings. Small traditions that quietly shape the community. Suddenly, the city becomes larger than the version you first imagined. Perhaps other human beings are much the same. Every person you meet has spent decades living inside experiences you will never fully know. The conversations that encouraged them, the disappointments that changed them, the fears they rarely speak about, the quiet joys that gave them hope. None of those experiences make them more human than you, but they do make them different. And perhaps that difference is not something to overcome. Perhaps it is something to become curious about. The moment we stop assuming our own experience is the ordinary one, the world begins to expand. Questions become easier than certainty. Listening becomes more valuable than convincing. Understanding becomes more interesting than agreement. Perhaps the most remarkable truth is not that human beings see the world differently. It is that despite our differences, we spend so much of our lives trying to understand one another. Every life is a sample of one. Every memory reveals something no one else could have lived. Every perspective contains one small piece of a reality far too large for any one person to experience alone. Perhaps wisdom isn't discovering that everyone agrees. Perhaps wisdom is discovering how much there still is to learn from lives unlike our own. Sooner than you think, someone will say something that surprises you. Perhaps you'll disagree. Perhaps you'll wonder how they could possibly believe what they believe. When that moment arrives, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself one quiet question. What experiences might have brought them here? Not because they must be right, not because you must be wrong, but because every human being has traveled a different road to arrive at this conversation. Perhaps the greatest illusion isn't believing that everyone agrees with us. Perhaps it's forgetting that no one else has ever lived our life. Every one of us moves through the world carrying a completely unique story. The remarkable thing is not that our stories are different. The remarkable thing is that they overlap often enough for understanding to be possible at all. The next time you quietly assume that everyone must see what you see, remember this: you're not looking at the average human experience. You're looking through the only life you have ever lived. And perhaps the beginning of wisdom is realizing that everyone else is doing exactly the same.